So, hey, everyone, welcome. Team Endicott here. Mike Ernest, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Tom Endicott himself.
Right.
We wanted to continue on with our discussion with all of you and use tonight as an opportunity to talk about the current marketplace. I think one of the overwhelming questions that we get on a daily basis from buyers and prospective buyers is, what is the market doing right now, and how does that affect me? It's a much different market than it was just 3 weeks ago, 3 months ago, definitely 3 years ago. So if you're someone new to the market or someone who may have purchased a home 5 years ago, things have definitely changed a little bit. So
well, we've seen it's gone from one extreme to the other over the last 13 years.
Absolutely.
Or so. Wow, man, the buyer market is a tough market to be in right now.
Sure.
So it's constricted since last time you and I talked. It's gotten even tighter for buyers in that the number of new listings that have come on the market.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So from March of last year to March of this year, knowing that the second half of March last year we tanked.
Right.
Because of COVID. Right.
Sure.
So we tanked last year. This year, no one's afraid of COVID from a real estate standpoint. I mean, last year we were showing in rubber gloves, and we had on 2 sets of masks. And
right.
Not that way.
Yeah, showings were restricted. There had to be windows. Only certain people could be inside of the home, and that's we've adjusted to that. And I think it speaks highly of our industry, where at that time we were able to kind of adjust on the fly and still conduct business.
Yeah, we've I don't want to say loosened up, but I think we're just a little bit more comfortable with the environment we're showing.
Sure.
So that's good. But from March of last year versus March of this year, we're down in our service area. We're down 26% in new listings.
Right.
So we don't have any inventory coming on, and as you know, we're up 6% in pendings.
Right.
So as soon as the homes come on the market.
Yeah, so we're about 25% below where we typically are this time of year in the number of homes available for sale, but we're actually up in the number of homes that are basically being sold.
Yeah, and if we had more inventory, I think you'd agree that we would be, that 6% would be 20, 30, 40%.
Yeah, for sure.
We just don't have the inventory.
Yeah, if we had even the standard amount of inventory or an increase in inventory, it'd be a historic market right now. It's historic right now, but not for not for the reasons that I think people like. So let's talk about that a little bit. So it's a tight market. Explain. Let's just give a little bit of perspective on why that is, so folks kind of understand how we got here.
Right. Okay.
So
we're basically paying for 07 through 12.
Okay.
We're paying for that. At that point, when the market tanked back then, builders stopped. They stopped their options. They stopped building. They stopped developing. They just stopped. Yeah. And that was up till 2012, 13 or so. And then when the market started picking up, they started coming into it. They have slowly, that inventory that they had has been absorbed, and now finally we're to the point where they're behind, and they can't do it. We just put one under contract today. And they're looking at maybe November, December to get built. Yeah,
so new construction builders, literally for what, 3 to 5 year window there, weren't doing they weren't doing anything back in the late 2000s.
Right.
Into the the early teens, and then that created that shortfall, and we've been able to kind of work around that, I think, as a market, but now it's really come home to roost, as they say.
Yeah, and the numbers that we hear are that from that 07 to 12 period, we're about 5 million homes short nationwide.
Sure.
Now, we don't build that. That's not a weekend project.
Yeah, it's going to take several years to kind of catch up.
Yeah.
With new construction, which then trickles down to the rest of the marketplace.
Right. And when you start talking about that trickle down, the family that's looking to move up from the 300, 250, 350 up into the 350, 550 range, they're the ones that are stuck right now.
Sure.
For not being able to get that new construction and supplies, which means they're not selling their $250,000 to $350,000 house, and we're not building any new $250,000, $350,000 houses.
Right. So it's
that segment of the market.
Really so we're having a lot of things kind of compounding on top of each other.
That's right.
Where builders are doing everything they can right now and working very aggressively to get homes built, but because of the demand, they themselves can't meet the demand that they have. So.
As a side note for that, if you are building, your patience level has got to be higher. They're all at capacity, and it's not like Pulte has one set of people that frame their houses, and then Dries has a different set. I mean, they may have different sets, but it's not exclusive. So this framer, they're framing for this builder, that builder, that builder. I mean, they're just framers. That's what they're doing.
Sure.
And so it's not like one builder has a huge advantage over another builder with supply or manpower. So they're all short of manpower and time, and that's why those build times go from, they used to be 4 months, and now we're 6 months, 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, if we're lucky.
Yeah.
So again, because of that lack of new home building that we typically see on a regular basis, roughly 10 years ago, that has finally caught up to us as an overall market. Speaking of kind of compounding that, if you're a seller or if you're someone who's looking to move out of your home and bump up, you're very hesitant right now to do that. So we speak to folks all the time who would love to be able to sell their home, but they're not wanting to list their home right now because they don't want to become a buyer, which then further exacerbates that problem of not getting the usual amount of inventory on the market that we typically see.
Right.
So. And then on top of that, there's also been an influx of new buyers to the marketplace. So we're seeing really a new generation of buyers kind of come on. I think the millennial generation is out in full force. They're establishing their careers now, starting families themselves, and
starting to want to have a little bank equity,
a little equity.
They want in themselves instead of a landlord.
Yeah, they want to have a backyard instead of living in an apartment. Right. It's a very common thing to see, but we're seeing it all at once. And big driver with that, obviously, is the low interest rates that's available to them right now.
And that's actually good news right now. We just saw today where the Fed does not have any, their intentions are not to increase rates this year.
Okay.
So hopefully we get a little bit of reprieve from that. Interest rates going up. Now, economic conditions, we don't know.
Sure.
Those might push it anyway, but the Fed is not going to do anything intentionally that might trigger an increase in the interest rate.
Okay. So long story short, we have less homes on the market. Yeah. We have more buyers on the market. Yeah. And there's not a solution in place at the moment to try to bring those things to a level playing field.
It's like the ship in the canal, the El Green that got kind of sideways.
And the Suez Canal.
Yeah,
sure.
Suez Canal. That's kind of where we are with this big bottleneck of homes that nobody can get through it. So we are working with the buyers, and in that 250, 350 range, that's a really tough nut to crack right now.
So let's talk about that. Knowing now that we kind of laid the groundwork there on what the landscape looks like, what are some things as a buyer? I'll just put my shoes in the buyer and I come to you, hey, Tom Endicott, what can I do right now to be competitive against 20 other buyers that are all zeroed in on this home?
So 5 things.
Okay.
5 things I would look at on top of realistic expectations.
Sure.
So we're not going to Walmart to buy a can of soup, right? This is a big transaction. It's complicated. There's lack of supply. Having the expectation that, hey, we're going to go look at 4 houses on Saturday, we're going to pick one, we're going to buy it, probably unrealistic expectation.
Okay.
So first, let's just set the expectation. But after that, there's 5 things that, from a listing agent, when I'm in the listing agent's position, I see that are either being done or not being done that impact what a seller thinks.
Okay.
Number 1 is the buyer agent, we call it a recon call. All right. So is the buyer agent actually calling the listing agent to poke and prod and ask and develop a relationship and get a little groundwork in that the other agents aren't.
And that's critical as a buyer agent, is to seek out that information. And the vast majority of our listing agents are more than willing to give you that information because it benefits the sellers. So if there's a certain closing date the seller's looking for, or some other like terms and conditions, possession.
Don't include the refrigerator, it was a wedding gift.
Right, absolutely. So unfortunately, that's not always done. So kind of right off the bat is...
And out of the last one we did, we had 70 showings, 20 offers, and less than half the agents called me.
Yeah.
And they wrote bad offers.
For sure.
They didn't, there were some things I would tell them very upfront that this is important to these sellers. And, I mean, when you've got 20 offers in hand and you've got one that has a bad term in it, it goes to the bottom of the pile.
And there's no recovery.
Right.
So
because you make it known to all the other agents that, hey, we're presenting all the offers on Saturday at 3:00. Present your offer, your best offer by Saturday at 3:00.
Okay, so let's pause right there. So that's something that's changed. I would say in the last. I started seeing it about a year ago, but really in the last 6 months is when that's really come into play. So, for lack of a better term, I'll call it a normal market. You would go out, look at homes, decide, hey, I want to buy 123 Smith Street, and you write an offer on 123 Smith Street. Right. And if it's not the best offer, you could at least engage in negotiation. There'd be counter offers and back and forth until both sides came to an agreed upon settlement, and you move forward with buying the home. That is gone. That's gone.
Yeah. Might be a phone call.
Yeah.
Hey Mike, like all your offers, you want to close on the 16th. My folks really want to close on the 17th. Can we make that quick adjustment? We're not really negotiating.
Yeah, there's counter offers back and forth are gone right now.
And
so,
if you get a counter, we literally gave a seller, and it has to be reasonable.
Sure.
So that's okay. Well, what's reasonable? I don't know. In that particular case, last one we did, 45 minutes was reasonable.
Absolutely.
We gave them 15 minutes to have a conversation about a minor item that we wanted to counter. They agreed to it. We sent the counter over and gave them 45 minutes to get back to us because we had another offer there that
you have to respond to. If not, So
that's all changed.
So yeah, I just wanted to make that point. So the old way of doing things is on pause right now. So that recon call is critical because without it, you're putting in an offer really blind, and if there's one little thing out of whack, and yet another agent has made that call and has gotten that information, and their buyers have tailored their offer accordingly, you can't compete against it.
And it goes all the way down to like the seller's disclosure: is it signed or not?
Right.
I mean, you get an offer that has a signed sales disclosure, seller's disclosure, and great, you're good. Mm-hmm. But you get one that doesn't have that, that's an out for a buyer.
For sure.
And in a seller's market, any out for the buyer is something the sellers it makes them nervous.
For sure.
They don't want to be there. So a well-written offer, which is generally done after a recon call, will be very beneficial to a buyer.
Yeah, and there can't be any, hey, we forgot to check this box in the purchase agreement.
Right.
Sorry. The other offer checked the box, and we don't have the time to go back and forth and correct that after the fact. So, that piece is very important, the recon call.
Right.
So that it's incumbent upon the buyer agent to do their due diligence in order to make that happen. Mm-hmm. We always certainly do that. That's part of our standard operating procedure for us. What are some other things that you see that buyers?
Yeah, let's talk about seller letters or buyer letters.
Okay.
We call them love letters.
Yeah, that's something just very recently, and I mean recently by in the last week or two. Indiana Association of Realtors kind of came down and really put some guidance going forward on those. Right. And I'll let you kind of explain why.
It all has to do with discrimination.
Yeah. Right.
So do we still write them? We give the buyer the option to write them. Mm-hmm. Do we present them? We present them. That's an evolving situation right now. We've asked to not include any photos with our love letters now. But we do still, is this being recorded? We still Facebook stalk our sellers if we're able to.
Sure.
To see if we can make some kind of connection. So we might not necessarily talk about the familial makeup of the family or whatever, but we might say, oh, we're starting an internship in this company that we happen to find out. You
also work in this company, exactly. And we had that not too long ago, wasn't it? I think one of your buyers, it was
a doctor.
A doctor was going to work for the same medical facility or hospital that the seller was.
So if we can make a connection that way, sure. And it's amazing to me how sellers will respond to these letters sometimes. I mean, you sit down and, hey, here's offer A that's got, it's $300,000 cash, and then you've got offer B that's 5% down, that's not full price, and but it's got a letter that connects with the seller, and the seller says, oh, I want to talk about these people.
Sure.
Don't know what direction we're going to go, but it gets their attention.
Absolutely.
So we have to be a little bit careful with how we write those now, or how buyers write those. And here's another concept with that, is that listing agents are not obligated to present those.
So we as buyer's agents can submit that along with our offer to the listing agent with full intentions, and the listing agent is under no obligation, like you said, to give that to the seller.
And now, if you reference it in the purchase agreement,
sure.
Hey, see attached love letter. Probably phrase it differently, but if we say that, then now that's part of the purchase agreement. It has to be presented.
Okay.
But if it's not, that listing agent is not obligated, and there are some agents that just either they request that there are no love letters, or they won't present them.
Right. So I'm seeing more and more of that of listing agents saying don't send them.
Yeah.
So let's talk real quick about why that is. So again, referencing, I'm using the term normal market, just to put their best foot forward. Years past, buyers would write a letter saying, hey, this is who we are, we loved your home, this is why we loved your home, this is why it's appealing to us,
right.
And it could be for any number of reasons, and then they send that along with the offer, right. Just to kind of put a more of a human touch to it.
Yep.
Well, now, because it is so competitive, all the buyers are trying to do that. And they're throwing family photos. Here we are with our new newborn baby, and it sets the seller up for what could potentially be, and maybe not even to intentionally,
right.
but picking an offer because of one of those reasons.
Yeah. Well, it runs into discrimination problems, and that can be one of several things. It can be it's sexual orientation, race, religion, familial status. I mean, it's got like 12 things in it.
Sure, for sure.
So there's a lot of potential problems with that. So that's one that we're still that's evolving and talking.
Okay, so it looks like we have a question that came in. They're wanting to know about down payments. So does a buyer having a down payment make their offer more attractive to the seller, or is that seller not even aware of that? So down payment, that could be a couple of things.
Yeah.
So it could be earnest money, it could be down payment on their mortgage. Are they putting 5% down, 20% down?
Right. So if we're talking about earnest money, this is strictly my opinion, but earnest money means nothing to me unless, from a listing agent, unless you're going to make it non-refundable.
Sure.
Okay. If it's not a non-refundable earnest money, then there's no real advantage for a seller to really pick that. So I put $5,000, $10,000. I mean, it's still distributed one of three ways. You buy it, you get it back. 2, mutual release. 3, small claims court. That's it.
That's right.
So, well, there's a 4th for brokers, but 3. So really, how much are we arguing for? Now, if you make it non-refundable, now you've got my attention.
Okay.
But let's go, I'm going to count that question as how much down payment I'm putting.
And I think that's probably more the intent. We're doing, sake of argument, conventional mortgage. We're buying a $250,000 home. We plan on putting $20,000 down. Does that number have an impact from a seller standpoint? So, I have my opinion. I'm curious to see what yours is.
It's what you're trying to convey with that from a buyer's standpoint is we have the financial ability to buy this home, right? So regardless of what my percent down is going to be, I'm going to have that pre-approval letter. As a listing agent, I'm reviewing that pre-approval letter. I want to make sure, number one, it talks about I've seen their credit.
Right.
Okay, credit, I mean, that decides a lot.
Because there's pre-qualification letters and there's pre-approval letters, which takes that process a step further, and the lender's actually really diving into the financials of the buyer.
And pull the credit.
And pull the credit.
Got to see that credit. So, but on the other hand, we have some people who have plenty of money for down payment. They just don't want to use it towards a house because money's so cheap right now.
Sure.
So when we have buyers like that, I think for our responsibility to the buyer, we need to communicate to the listing agent that says, hey, look, we're only putting 5% down. We just want you to know we have plenty of money. We could put more down, but we just want to use the interest rate. You got to tell that whole story. If you don't, you just come up with one that's got 5% down versus one that's putting 40% down.
The 40% is going to look more attractive on paper.
Right. So you're going to have an agent that's going to tell that story.
Okay.
That's fair.
And we'll get to this in a minute, but appraisal gap coverage, that could be another reason why, hey, we're not going to put 20% down. We may only put 10 because we need to keep a little bit of money on the side to make up for a potential low appraisal. So I don't want to go too far down that just right now. So let's circle back to that. But what are some other things? So we talked about buyer's letters. We've talked about doing the recon call. What's number 3 on your list out of 5?
Realistic and pricing.
Okay.
So we're now having to gear this backwards, where we used to go in and say, hey, and you know what? Let's make sure we got that question answered. So whoever submitted that question, if you'll let us know that we answered your question specifically, if we need to dive into that a little bit more, we will.
Absolutely.
Right? We'll get back to that.
Sure.
Okay. The next one is the realistic pricing. So we're really have to backwards engineer our offers from the standpoint of what is your ability as a buyer to actually do. Up until the last 3 or 4 or 5 months, you said, hey, I want to go buy a $300,000 house. You qualify for the 300. We'd go negotiate. And if we got to 305, 290, whatever. 295,
305, 5,000 left or right of list price.
What we're finding now, and I think your favorite phrase is the listing price is the
starting line. Yeah,
list.
The days right now, with everything, there's always a caveat. So I'm going to speak in general terms, but the days of starting low and finding a middle ground between that and list price isn't happening. List price is the starting line, and really it's getting to the point where it's the warm-up area before you really even get to the starting line.
And what we're finding, again, every home has its own situation, but what we are finding is maybe a 10%-ish, give or take, maybe some are 15 over, but that's not uncommon. So a $300,000 house list price may very well go for $330,000, $335,000.
Yeah, and we're exactly, you're seeing $25,000, $30,000 offers above list price in that price bracket. I've seen, in the mid twos, $250,000 house getting $275,000 offers on it. So that's 25 over list on those. So how does that impact the transaction? So you have a $250,000 house. We feel it's priced appropriately, but we know there's going to be, because it's so competitive, everyone or mostly everyone who's submitting an offer is writing offers above list price. So at what point does it just get non-attainable? So if I want to buy a $250,000 house, why shouldn't I just go out and write an offer for $350,000, $100,000 over list price? Where does it become unrealistic?
So we're gonna we pull comps.
Okay.
We're gonna pull comps, but literally we look at them, we just don't want to be. I mean, you know who I would not want to be today?
An appraiser.
An appraiser. Yeah. Their job is so tough. I mean, they cannot keep up with the rate of appreciation right now.
Yeah, so appraisers right now, they're going back 6 to 12 months to find those prior home sales to come up with a value in this market, and it just doesn't work. The market is really driving the prices right now.
And with our constriction of actual sales, it's the amount of comps we have are less. It's actually just flipped from 07 through 12 where we just couldn't find any sales.
Right.
There just weren't any sales.
Okay.
So it is just flipped, but I wouldn't want to be an appraiser right now. But from engineering that backwards, if you think your budget is going to be $250,000, you better be looking at homes that are listed at 200 to 225. If you want to have a realistic expectation of putting yourself in a position to potentially win that listing.
That's right. Yeah, it's if you know your max budget, like you said, is around that 250. Looking at a $250,000 house is going to be probably a tough.
It's going to be disappointing.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough process.
Yeah, it's a paradigm shift, and some agents are on board with that, and some of them aren't.
Okay.
So
we know the starting line is list price. So because of that, because offers are going 10,000, in some cases even higher than that, above list price, there is that fear from a seller, or that hesitation from the seller to say, hey, these are all beautiful offers. Right. They're all $25,000 over list price. Is it going to appraise for that though? And that's the critical piece. Yeah. So to make up that concern, what are folks doing now? So what are buyers doing?
We've got the appraisal gap coverage.
The appraisal gap coverage, sure. So what that basically says is, I'm a buyer and I said, hey, your $250,000 home, I'm willing to pay you $275,000. I know that's 25 over. There's a good chance it probably won't appraise, but we'll pay cash out of pocket at closing to make up the difference, or some portion of that difference.
Right. Put a number on top of it.
Yeah, you put a number on it.
And this is a whole nother subject we'll have on another conversation. But what we're experiencing now are people. The Midwest, in the nation's eyes, is undervalued. So
undervalued. I see it all the time. Especially on the investor side of things. I speak to investors out in California, Arizona, quite frequently. Colorado is another, and they see the value of homes here, and they just can't believe that they can buy a 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath home for $250,000. I mean, that doesn't get you.
So they're coming out.
Yeah.
And they are coming out in droves. We did one 3 weeks ago or so. We had 12 offers. 7 of the 12 offers were industrial strength investors. And they're cash, and that makes it hard for a homeowner who's going to get a mortgage. So what you mean by industrial strength is it's basically a hedge fund that is purchasing. Literally got a letter. I can't not laugh when I say this. We got a proof of funds letter that showed that they had $211 million in their account.
That's I think they can buy
that $200,000 house.
Yeah, there's no question there. So
and
what it is, so it's basically a hedge fund. You have a pool of investors all buying into this, and they're able to go into markets like Indianapolis and just pay above list price, just because their goal maybe isn't finding a value purchase. It's just to acquire. They know
that our appreciation rate is going to be significant over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, they can buy a home over value now, but it's gonna pay for itself, just like you said.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. From a buyer's perspective,
sure. So
doing some gap coverage on appraisals is almost all of the offers that we're getting accepted now are having gap coverage of some sort. So, as a buyer, that really comes back to kind of what we were talking about a moment ago, is liquid cash. How are you financially set up? Do you have a savings that you can tap into, or are you, if you're a buyer that's 100% VA financing that only has a little bit of reserves, it's going to be really hard. But what I'm seeing is kind of surprisingly so. Some of these first-time home buyers, because they have delayed getting into the buying market for so long, they've been able to build up some reserves. Well, it comes back to that mortgage part we're talking about, loan to value.
That's exactly right.
You know what? We'll go to a higher loan to value ratio to free up some cash to cover some mortgage.
So instead of somebody putting 10% down on a purchase, they're maybe only putting 5% down on the mortgage, but using that extra 5% really to put down in cash to make up an appraisal gap.
And once they get the appraisal, if the appraisal's fine, they can go back in and say, "Hey, lender, we want to go ahead and put down another $10,000.
We want to dump some more down onto the mortgage itself for
Absolutely.
Sure." So what are some other things? So there's that piece.
So the fifth one is the inspections.
Okay.
Oh man, this is a tough one.
Inspections are tough. So again, normal market, normal times, you buy a home. Go ahead. You have your 3 things. Let's just talk about it.
Right. So you have, as a buyer in the purchase agreement, you have 3 options.
Yeah.
And up until 4, 5, 6 months ago.
Yeah,
we would do traditional, which traditional says, hey, we're going to have the home inspected within 14 days, whatever the number is. We're going to negotiate repairs, and everybody's going to be happy, and we're going to move on.
Okay.
All right, traditional.
That's traditional.
And I would say unless it was an investor, 99% of our buyers did it that way.
That's how it was.
That's the way it was.
Yeah, it was almost odd to see anything different.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Second way then is to do as is, which basically says, hey, they're trying to communicate to the seller. We'll buy the home. We know you're not going to do repairs, but we want to have the home inspected just to make sure we don't have any huge issues.
Sure.
Okay.
And if there are, we'll talk about it. If it's unresolvable, we walk away. Not a big deal.
Yes. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
And then the third way, of course, is waiving the inspection.
Which is we're not doing it, and even if we do it,
right.
there's no conversation to be had. We're moving forward towards purchases.
And I've had more and more of those from a listing agent standpoint. I'm having more and more of those. The other, so we have more waived appraisals than we've had. But then we have to talk about as is versus traditional.
Sure.
So the as is basically says we recognize you're not going to do any repairs, but it also does not obligate the buyer to give the seller the opportunity to do a repair.
So the verbiage in the as is addendum, when you write that offer, basically says, hey, we're not going to ask you to fix anything, but it gives that buyer that out where if there's something that was previously undisclosed, something that's a defect that they deemed unresolvable, they can just turn around and walk away, and the buyer, their seller has no recourse.
That's right.
Whereas in a traditional setting where you're doing a normal inspection period, you have to afford the seller the opportunity to address those concerns, and they can address it in many ways. Obviously,
you negotiate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
so from that perspective, we're getting the flag. Okay, this is the last item on here, so we're going to be perfect on timing.
Okay.
So from that perspective, it's a little bit odd in our industry. Some agents do think that as is a better deal for a seller.
They do.
Some don't. We don't.
Right.
So we would prefer to have, as a listing agent, to say, hey, we're going to do the inspections. By the way, I saw an offer last week where prior to writing the offer, the buyer scheduled the home inspection for 2 days, 3 days after the what would be the timeline.
So the buyer came in, and before even writing the offer, they scheduled their home inspection on the property to show the seller, hey, we're getting in there on Monday morning. We're not waiting 2 weeks.
Right.
Super aggressive on the seller. I mean, kudos.
We'll be working that into our system.
Right. It's impressive.
Tubbs, you've got some work coming up. Right? But with that being said, the other side of that is to say, okay, well, we're going to do our inspections. We're going to give you the opportunity to fix it, but anything below a certain number, $1,000, $5,000, we're not going to ask for.
Right.
So basically, trying to communicate to the seller.
We're only looking at major issues here, and which you would still do with the as-is addendum. However, it allows, from a seller standpoint, it allows me to at least address it, and we can either repair it ourselves, or come up with some cash, settlement, so attach a value to it and settle up at closing, versus the as-is addendum where the buyer literally can just say, hey, I'm out.
And that's what happened to us last summer when these first started coming around, and it wasn't technically a repair that was an issue as much as it was another home that came up that they liked, and they used their as-is addendum to kill our deal, and then they bought the other home.
So you really have to look at it from one or two ways. So as a listing agent, in order, we would always prefer to see waived inspections.
Yep.
The second would be a traditional inspection period with some sort of some sort of cap on the dollar amount that you would address on a particular item. And then for us, actually, the third would be the as-is addendum, which may surprise some folks. Now, as a buyer, it would probably be the complete opposite.
Right. But it's a seller's market.
It's a seller's market. So again, anything you can do as a buyer right now to accommodate what's good for the seller, we can certainly do. So I know we're kind of up on it, but I want to go through just a couple of items here real quick that usually get written into offers. And you just say, are we seeing it? Are we not seeing it? Right. So, title fees. What are you seeing right now in title fees on offers? Who's paying what? Normally, seller pays their expenses, buyer pays their expenses.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit of relief now from a seller's perspective, where the buyers are absorbing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it just comes down to this.
Yeah. So, what about property taxes?
Property taxes. So we used to do back in the 80s and 90s. We will pay the next installment due, which would then free up money for the seller. Then we moved to prorated, and now we're seeing a movement back to
where buyers are paying either all of the owed property taxes, or 6 months, or 12 months, whatever that number is.
Another way to net a higher number without increasing the sales price to a number that you start to get that needle up to appraisal value.
So really what happens, you start, again, starting the starting line's list price, you get to a number that you can only go so high.
Right.
So what other levers can we pull in this offer to make us stand out?
Right.
It's not always, you can throw as much cash at it as you can. So outside of that, there's just a few finite things, and that's taxes, that's who's paying those random expenses like title fees. What about homeowners policy homeowner warranty?
Yeah, the warranties. If I was, I'm nervous for home warranty companies to survive at this point.
Nobody's paying for home warranties.
Out of the 20 offers we had on the last deal we did, 0 asked for a home warranty. Period.
And that was almost. I don't want to say standard, but
you almost always ask.
It was almost common that, hey, the seller understood we'll buy a 1-year home warranty policy for the seller's buying that for the buyers.
Yeah,
that's not happening right now. Now the buyers can certainly pay for their own if they so choose, but
not coming out of the seller's column.
It's not coming out of the seller column. So I think we painted probably enough doom and gloom right now.
Yeah. But having an agent that will go through and do those things for you, and here's the part is you got to keep swinging.
Yeah. That's a great point.
Because what's going to happen is that home prices appreciate. If you say I'm going to get out of the market and I'm just going to wait, they're not going. We're not doing this.
So
we're expecting to go from this maybe to this.
So that again, that can't be understated. We get some buyers that get frustrated because normally we would go out and 5-6 homes in, we find one, we get it under contract. Now it's 20, 30 homes sometimes, and it's very easy for a buyer to get frustrated. They and rightfully so. And the inclination sometimes from a buyer standpoint is, hey, we're just going to sit out. We're going to rent for another year. We'll reapproach this next summer. But it's probably worth it to keep plugging away until one hits for you, just because of that, because the home values next year are going to be higher than what they are now. So interest rates are going to go up. So the home you could buy now for $250. You may be priced out of that come next year.
Keep plugging. Just know that it's not as easy as it used to be.
It's not as easy, but the key to that obviously is working with an agent that is checking all those boxes and doing everything you can to set you up for success as a buyer. So
now I got it, and so I think I think we've got all our questions answered. We're good to go there. I'm going to tell you that one of the weirdest things I saw in one of the last offers that we had the 20 offers on.
Mm-hmm.
So the buyers were very astute and picked up that our sellers were into gaming and video gaming, and had figurines around the house and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So in the offer, it said that upon accepted offer, the buyers would give the seller 2 2021 Gen Con tickets. Perfectly legal.
Perfectly legal.
But that's how creative people are getting.
We have seen it also. I don't think it was on our team, but we've heard from others where they were offering Travelocity gift certificates to the sellers, basically paying for
vacation.
Paying for a vacation for the sellers. So if you're a seller right now and you want to go to Cancun, you could sell your house for a historic price and then get a vacation out of it possibly. So
All right, so we've covered our material.
Mm-hmm.
Next time we're going to do it from the seller's perspective.
Exactly. So completely different world in which they're living in right now. So it's good to be a seller, but again, it's a great time to buy a home, even as tough as it is.
Just gotta keep at it.
Okay. All right. Well, we thank all of you for tuning in. We enjoy doing this. I know I enjoy sitting down with you. We look forward to our next conversation.
Perfect. So thank you.